Hi ladies and gentlemen, it's good to see you tonight and be with you. It's my pleasure to be here and to be able to share some things with you, some information that I think will be helpful. The topic for tonight is compassion fatigue, which is very similar to burnout. Well, what is that? If you haven't heard the term compassion fatigue before now, it's a type of burnout, but it's the type that hits those in the caregiving professions most often. Compassion fatigue. The name gives it away. It really is for any kind of profession that is a caregiving profession. Even things like humanitarian aid, going to disaster zones, disaster response teams, and that sort of thing. Both compassion fatigue and burnout is a result of cumulative high stress and exhaustion. It's the emotional drain from being empathetic and continually giving of ourselves to others. Compassion fatigue happens when we're under prolonged, chronic, continuous, high, intense stress for long periods of time. Compassion fatigue and burnout both have characteristics and symptoms that are very similar to those of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. And I think both those terms, compassion fatigue and burnout, are more accurately characterized as adrenal fatigue. When we are in a stressful situation, our bodies produce an extra amount of adrenaline and other stress hormones like cortisol. And when we're under stress for long periods of time, our bodies are producing high quantities of this adrenaline and cortisol and the other hormones. And then over a period of time, it may just be from the accumulation of the stress over time, or it may be something that happens, an event that causes you to just shut down. And it can be almost in an instant that you just shut down. And in adrenal fatigue, the body no longer produces the adrenaline that it needs and the other hormones. And so it's almost very much like being addicted to something, the adrenaline rush. And if you don't have the right amount of hormones for your body to function at the level that it's been functioning, then everything sort of shuts down. Let's go to our next bit of information. This is a diagram to sort of conceptualize what this idea of compassion fatigue is all about. In the circle we see that we have compassion fatigue, which results in a loss of self. Here, vicarious trauma is what happens, or what it's called, when we are listening closely, attentively, caring for our clients, compassionate about what they're going through. And they're telling us their stories. And we're listening with an open heart and with compassion. And we begin to feel the pain, and the suffering, and the loss that they have. And so we experience their trauma vicariously. And in situations like that, when this happens continually and it leads to compassion fatigue, we will actually experience change in our cognitive schemas and our perspective on life. Well, that is vicarious trauma, experiencing it through the the telling of the story, there's also something very similar. It's called secondary traumatic stress. And again, the symptoms of all of these are very similar to those of PTSD. Really, it's emotional and physical exhaustion and adrenal fatigue. We empathize with the people that we care about and that we're counseling. And we enter into their world with them, to walk with them, to give them encouragement, to give them hope, to give them what we can. Compassion, care, help, whatever resources we have or have available. Help them find new perspectives and direction. Perhaps set some new goals for their life. We lend them our strength, our hope, and our courage so that it gives them the things that they need so that they can cope with their life situation and find perspective, perhaps change their thinking in some way, consider their options, and begin to be able to move forward again from the stuck place that they found themselves. Did anybody look at the clock? Okay. Who is at risk? Well, there goes one paper. Who is at risk for chronic compassion fatigue and burnout? As I mentioned, it's caregivers in general, all types. Those in the counseling professions are some of the most susceptible to these conditions. Those in the nursing and medical professions and other healthcare professions. Family members who give long-term care to their loved one, and it's just a long period of high stress. They also can suffer and experience these conditions of burnout and compassion fatigue. Those who are caring for the elderly and disabled, such as in a group home or a nursing home, where they have to be constantly on alert. They have to be very diligent and comprehensive in the care that they give to the patients. And of course, those that are working in palliative care and dealing with the diseased person as well as their family of those who are dying, that's a particularly traumatic, caring profession that's susceptible to this. Ministers are also susceptible to this, always giving out, and very often not having a place to resupply themselves, to re-energize themselves. As I mentioned earlier, humanitarian aiders, rescue professions, those in the military, they know on a daily basis that they are in extreme danger if they're on the front lines. They could kill or be killed at any moment. So they have to be hyper vigilant. But they're willing to do that for their values, for their country, for their people. But very often, men and women who have gone to the battlefield and experienced the tragedy of war come home with symptoms that are virtually the same as compassion fatigue. It's just called post-traumatic stress disorder. And of course, the same thing is true for those who experience disasters and tragedies, earthquakes, floods, famine, typhoons, you name, there's such a long list of natural disasters that could strike an area at any moment, and one day you're fine and the next day you're experiencing intense tragedy. And it's very difficult in that time to be able to garner the resources that you need to survive that situation, to be able to cope and maybe be able to help someone else. But those who are in it and